afternoon. Welcome to my class. This is chapter 27. It deals with topics of new frontiers and changing societies. And so we see this chapter start with 1960. 1960 is the right smack dab in the middle of this explosion of chaos and uncertainty and sadness and tragedy that was known as the Civil Rights Movement. So in the South, we have a large percentage of our population who has not been treated fairly. They've not been given the same opportunities educationally, economically, or socially. And so they are striving and fighting for those rights through this thing that is known as the Civil Rights Movement. Now, the unofficial leader of the Civil Rights Movement, of course, is Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. has put forth a program of nonviolent protest. And for him, that's the basis that everything he does is nonviolent protest. He will coordinate the creation of a couple of clubs or groups. One is SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. This is a group of people from the various churches in the South who thought that they would be the perfect spokesman for this civil disobedience and this nonviolent protest. They will lead a group of roughly 250,000 people to go to Washington, D.C., and that is known as the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. And it is there that Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech, pretty much summarizing in which he said he had a dream that all the future little children, whether they be black, white, yellow, red, it didn't matter, that they would all be able to sit down and play together and not discuss or discover the differences in their skin color. And Martin Luther King Jr. will also be instrumental in helping a group of young people put together a group which is called SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and this is in 1960. And this group of students, these young people, high school age kids, college kids, are focusing on helping young persons of color to find their way to the voter registration areas and to be able to get them registered to vote and to become politically active, because that's the only way that they can achieve these goals that they've set down for themselves of becoming equal. You have to fight for political equality. You have to strive for social economy. And you have to make sure that economically you have the right tools. That is a big part of getting education open the doors for those kids. So we're going to see a couple things also around the same time. It is in 1959 that the island of Cuba, which prior to that had been an independent country, has now fallen victim to a communist takeover by the Castro brothers. Fidel Castro, who was one of the military leaders at the time, and his brother Raul seized control of Cuba. And they began a communist regime which would start to reach out to the Russians for assistance and guidance in starting this new fledgling little communist nation. Now, we weren't too tickled about this at all. In fact, our president will make a very bold statement that we don't want to be neighbors with them. We do not like their kind. So the Russians, in response to this request by the Cubans, the Russians will offer, yes, we'll help you learn how to be a communist nation, but it's not going to be free. You're going to have to help us, give us back us little something, something. So the Cubans were all too ready. The Castros are going to really literally open the doors to the Cuban island so that the Russians can bring their stuff, their technology, their science, their machinery, their military strength, all of these things roll down into Cuba, which does not escape our notice. Russia has been sending military equipment, and they do something even worse. Russia will also bring in and supply, install, put together 4 nuclear sites on the island of Cuba, and they arm them with nuclear warheads. Now, this will not escape our attention. Our president at the time is Eisenhower. Eisenhower is going to demand that this stop. This cannot continue, and it is 1960. We're at the border, at the verge of something really, really wrong. Eisenhower demands that they stop it. Now, he's not going to be up for re-election. His vice president, Richard Nixon, is going to run for president in the 1960 election against John F. Kennedy. So John F. Kennedy is going to be very important in this conversation as he will become elected in 1960. He takes office in 1961. He immediately takes up that same argument with the Cubans. Get this stuff gone. And he addresses it with the Russians as well. So when Kennedy wins, he becomes the 35th president. And Kennedy is going to win because he uses this new medium we call television, which you and I are very familiar with. We've grown up with our whole lives. But this had been a very new, evolving technological wonder that he takes full advantage of. And he will be very photogenic. He is very smooth talker, and he will go on television and debate Richard Nixon in the very first presidential debate in the fall of 1960. Yes, Kennedy is going to win because of his stage presence. Nixon seems a bit edgy and nervous, and he is kind of all over the map, which gives him a disadvantage. Now, so we inaugurate President Kennedy on January 20th, 1961, and he immediately goes to work on this Cuba issue. He will start allowing and authorizing the CIA to train operatives to go into Cuba and to see what we can do to get rid of the Castros. This is going to lead to what is known as the Bay of Pigs disaster. So it's April of 1961. And at a place called Playa Girón, or the Bay of Pigs, the ex-Cubans who want to get rid of the Castro brothers, alongside the trained CIA operatives, are going to stage an invasion of Cuba. And as the plan was, we were supposed to send in air support. Planes are supposed to come in and bomb the crap out of Cuba to keep those forces, those Russians and Cubans, away from the area so that these forces could proceed. Ultimately, very last minute, Kennedy makes a decision that is probably the reason for the failure. Absolutely. At the very last minute, Castro is going to get aware that things are going on, but yet Kennedy decides he is going to stop the air support. He shuts the planes down, which will bring about a devastating loss for the Cubans and the American CIA team. We had 1,300 Americans are captured, 118 Americans are killed, 4,000 Cubans are injured, and 176 Cubans are killed. This is a huge victory for the Castro team and their Russian-trained troops. Now, that's not going to be the end of our conversations about Cuba. Now, these Russians continue to have their nuclear toys there on Cuba. Kennedy is going to be very insistent that this is going to have to stop. Those have to go away. And we will talk about that on the next video. See you soon.